The night my husband pushed me from the 20th floor, I thought my life was over. But fate gave me another chance, reborn with every memory of betrayal carved into my soul. This time I won't be the naive wife who loved blindly. This time I'll tear apart the man who murdered me and the best friend who stole him, piece by piece, until they choke on the ruin of their own lies. The wedding aisle was paved with white roses and bad omens. I didn't see the omens then. I saw Damian Cross smiling beneath an arch of winter lights, his tuxedo the black line drawn under a promise. He had chased me for 3 years like a storm on the horizon that refuses to move on. Grand gestures outside my office, handwritten letters in a looping hand that leaned forward like a runner at the starting line, bouquets that arrived so often the reception desk began setting out vases in advance. He was relentless and romantic in all the ways I thought proved devotion. I mistook persistence for character. I mistook hunger for love. My parents didn't. Sophia, my mother, Eleanor, had said that morning, the silk at her throat trembling with her breath. Marrying a man is merging balance sheets. Of the heart, of the mind, of your future. Damian's ledger is off. My father, Richard, more blunt. He smiles and never shows his teeth. I laughed the kind of laugh you used to keep your courage together. You're only saying this because I'm your only daughter. We're saying it because you're our only daughter, my mother corrected, almost pleading. I married him anyway. After photos and clinking glasses and a night sky so clear it looked polished. Damian leaned close during our first dance and whispered, I won. Should have chilled me. I mistook it for tender awe. 3 months later, my parents' Mercedes was crushed under the belly of an oil tanker on an otherwise empty stretch of highway. The tanker driver, a man with too many debts and a phone full of unanswered calls, had fallen asleep, they said. The police report said accident in 5 different ways. The funeral said final in only one. Grief is an anesthetic and a hallucinogen. It dulls, it distorts. I went through those days drifting, lifting pens I never set down, signing papers I didn't read, letting someone else mind the stove while the soup burned. Damian held me through nights I cried into his shirt and said, I'll handle everything, Sophia. Let me shoulder it. Your parents trusted me. Let me be the man they never had the chance to see. The board of the Hale Group, gray suits, careful eyes, watched him step into the light. He had a knack for rooms. The right handshake pressure, the right story about humble beginnings, the right deference to the right director. When he looked at me across long walnut tables, his gaze said, we're a team. I believed it. I believed him. I stepped back from the company the way you step back from a cliff edge when someone you love promises they know the way down better than you do. I wore black for months. Then navy. Then a white blouse one day because the closet was full of white blouses and my life, I told myself, had to resume. Somewhere inside that year my daughter was born. Rose, red-faced and furious at her own entrance. Then quiet and curious, a fist curled around my finger with a grip that could anchor a planet. I told myself that made it all right. Life had taken, life had given. The scales were balanced enough. Isabella Reed reappeared as if conjured by lullabies. My college roommate, best friend, maid of honor, a laughing shadow in all my photographs. She had moved to a different city after graduation, she said, but she was back often enough to know where Damian kept the good bourbon. We'd sit on the terrace after Rose fell asleep, and Isabella would talk about work that never paid enough and men who never stayed. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she laughed through it. I held her hand either way. I loved her because I had decided to, and because I needed something familiar that wasn't grief. You're lucky, she told me once, head tipped back to the stars. You fell in love with a man who worships you. Luck, I said, and smiled at a life I thought I understood. The first fissures were hairline, the kind you only see after a glass has already shattered. I found Damian's cufflink beneath the guest bed. He said he'd been searching for something in the storage closet. I found a hotel invoice tucked inside the pages of a biography he was pretending to read. He said it was a vendor breakfast meeting. Sometimes those run late. I found lipstick on a napkin in his glove compartment. Isabella's brand, the one I had bought her for her birthday. She said she had borrowed the car to run an errand. None of it was enough to indict. All of it was enough to itch under my skin. If I'm honest, the truth had been circling like a hawk long before the rooftop. I just kept ducking. Damian's mother, Vivian Cross, visited exactly once. She drifted through my home with an expression you reserve for exhibitions you didn't pay to see. You shouldn't coddle help, she told me, firing 3 housekeepers in one afternoon with a bone-dry smile. It makes them sentimental. She looked at Rose, sleeping in my arms. Do you intend to return to the office? I suppose Damian can hire a minder. I'm her mother, I said, and felt something iron settle inside my words. Vivian shrugged like she'd learned it in a Paris mirror. Motherhood is an occupation for women whose husbands are not busy. I didn't invite her again. Damian wore success the way some men wear scent, heavy enough to leave the room before he did. He collected powerful acquaintances like enamel pins, each with a story attached and a subtle bow of obligation earned. He stayed later at work. His phone lived face down. He was tender when he noticed me noticing. Flowers on Wednesdays instead of Fridays, my favorite pastries on my desk like apologies with powdered sugar. When I complained about something structural at Hale Group, a supplier bending deadlines, a mid-level manager suddenly insolent, he'd tilt his head like a doctor about to deliver a diagnosis. You're still grieving, he'd say, voice warm with clinical concern. It makes things look bigger than they are. Let me take this. Rest. We began to argue in soft tones, which is how you fight when the walls of a house you love are thin. Heard you toured the logistics wing without me, I said one night, folding laundry just to have something to fold. That used to be our routine. It's a warehouse, he said, kissing the top of Rose's head. Racks and forklifts. You should be resting. You look fragile. I'm not fragile, I said, but the word hooked into me and tugged. Of course you're not, he murmured and left it in the air like a perfume I couldn't stop smelling. Isabella started staying late. Dinner bled into nightcaps, bled into mornings where she was there when I walked into the kitchen, barefoot, half asleep, startled by laughter that felt too full for 7 a.m. She said she'd crashed on the sofa after too much wine. He said Damian was a good listener when I was busy with Rose. She said, don't be jealous, Soph, it's you he's obsessed with. And she hugged me and I hugged back because the alternative was to pull away and admit something I still wasn't prepared to look at. The day everything snapped, the sky had the washed-out blue of a bruise. Damian called from the office and said, can you bring Rose downtown? I want to show her the view. He sounded bright, and he never sounded bright anymore when it was about us. I said yes because love is a habit and I had trained myself well. The Hale Group tower cuts into the city like a blade. The rooftop garden had been my father's one impractical indulgence. Potted citrus in summer, cedar benches wide enough for a nap. A glass balustrade that made you feel like you were standing on air. I used to come up here with him on late nights when the office floor felt hollow, always some crisis rattling the ducts, and he'd say, perspective, princess. You can't solve anything with your nose pressed against it. When the elevator doors opened, the garden was empty. The wind lifted the fine hairs at the nape of my neck. I pulled Rose closer, her warm weight a counterargument to the altitude. Damian, I called. He stepped out from behind a row of planters as if from the wings of a stage. There was something wrong with the way he held his body, too loose like a man after the punchline. There you are, he said. You look beautiful. I hadn't tried. The words slid over me with no purchase. Where's everyone? It's just us, he said, and my mouth went dry. Second pair of heels clicked. Isabella appeared, red dress catching the light, neckline a dare. The wind curled a lock of hair across her cheek and she let it make itself at home. Sorry I'm late, she said, then smiled at Rose. A smile I'd once thought tender and now read as hungry. Hi, little lamb. Isabella, I said, all the oxygen gone from my lungs. Why are you here? To support Damian, she said lightly. To support you. I felt the air tilt, subtle like the first lean of a boat. What is this? Damian's smile thinned into something that showed the shape of his teeth. An ending, he said. And a beginning. I don't understand. That's the thing about you, Sophia. Isabella's voice turned warmer in a way that burned. You don't until it's much too late. I took a step back and the glass edge of the sky pressed cool against my spine. Instinctively, I pivoted to put my body between the balustrade and Rose. She stirred and burrowed closer, her thumb angling for her mouth. Damian, I said, and my voice came out steady because shock is a splint. What are we doing up here? He spread his hands. We're tidying up the narrative. The board is restless. Investors hate uncertainty. You've been unwell. Postpartum, then grief, then the stress. He glanced at Isabella, who nodded like a coach affirming a play. Unwell, I repeated, the word fizzing like acid on my tongue. Depression, Isabella supplied, sympathetic as a nurse with a needle behind her back. It can be so unpredictable. Stop. I shifted Rose higher on my hip. Her cheek slotted into the notch of my collarbone. If you have something to say it without the performance. Damian looked almost disappointed. Fine. I love Isabella. Always have. You were a detour. A useful one. Your parents never liked me. But I proved myself anyway. A sound left my body I didn't recognize. My parents are dead. Isabella rolled her eyes, then remembered to look pitiful. We didn't intend that, you know, she said, shrug thin. People make mistakes. Drivers fall asleep. Tragic. I saw it then. The carelessness beneath the cruelty, the way a wolf tosses a rabbit when it gets bored. Something in me calcified. How long? I asked. Damian's smile turned fond in a way that made me want to claw my own skin off. High school. My brain staggered. High school. We were each other's only light, Isabella said, and for a second something like sincerity flashed, genuine and poisonous. Then college. Then you, an accidental distraction with an excellent last name. Rose, I said, clutching my daughter so tight she fussed. Damian, she's yours. She's inconvenient, he said, and my vision stuttered. You're talking about your child. Isabella tilted her head. It's sweet that you think biology makes a person an obligation. I have a son, Damian added almost proudly. With Isabella. He'll have everything I fought for. He deserves it. Something hot and electric climbed my spine. Fought for? You infiltrated my family while I slept. We call it strategy, Isabella said. You should try it. She glanced at the city beyond the glass. Anyway, this is the easy version. A sad wife. The weight of grief. The pressure of a legacy. A rooftop. The papers will say you jumped. The wind made the citrus leaves shiver. Somewhere below, a horn honked, long and irritated, someone's impatience utterly ordinary while my life was being called closed. I'm not jumping, I said. Damian's eyes softened in mock pity. People rarely do. They fall. I took a step forward, away from the glass, toward him. If I could get to the elevator, to a phone, to anyone. If I could scream loud enough that the world noticed. He moved faster. His hand closed around my wrist with a grip that had never been tender. Don't be difficult, Sophia. Rose, bless her, began to cry, the hiccuping, panicked sobs of a child who doesn't understand the shape of danger but feels its temperature. The sound cracked something in me, and a wild animal I didn't know I kept inside stood up. I wrenched my arm and shoved into Damian with my shoulder, trying to unbalance him. For a heartbeat his shoes skated on the stone and hope flared sharp and reckless. If I could take him with me, if I could make this knot neat, if I could tear his narrative open and leave his hunger bleeding where everyone could see. Isabella screamed his name, fingers clawing for his sleeve. He found his footing with a dancer's quickness, rage unbuttoning his face. You stupid, the curse snapped like a belt. I lunged again, aiming low this time like my father taught me. Knee, ankle, the mechanics of collapse. But I had a 2-year-old on my hip and love is heavy. Damian's hand shot out, fingers digging into my upper arm, and Isabella's palm found the center of my chest and pushed. The glass pressed cold against my spine again. Rose's cries sharpened into a single long note. Please, I said, and the word cost me blood. Don't touch my daughter. Don't worry, Isabella cooed. It won't take long. I looked at Damian, then really looked, peeling his face back in my mind to find the boy he must have been, hungry and unnoticed, clever enough to survive, mean enough to decide that surviving wasn't enough. Maybe once there had been love inside him like a seed that never found rain. Maybe. It didn't matter. Look at me, Rose, I whispered, turning her face into my neck so she wouldn't see the city stand up and open its arms. Isabella's hand shoved again, harder. Damian's grip became gravity. The balustrade hit the backs of my thighs and the world did that thing worlds do before they move. It held its breath. I grabbed for Damian's lapels and caught them, a fistful of expensive thread. Come with me, I hissed, and for a fraction of a second his eyes flashed fear because predators aren't scared of blood but they are scared of falling. He tore free. The motion staggered me backward, one heel lifted off the stone, air licking at the arch of my foot. You won't win, I said, not sure if I was promising or cursing. Not in the way that matters. Not with your son. Not with her. Not with yourself. Damian's mouth twitched like a man about to answer a reporter. History only remembers the winners. Then I'll haunt the margins, I said. Isabella laughed, bright and delighted. You always were better at commentary than strategy. I could see my reflection in the glass then. Hair wild, blouse wrinkled from a long day with a toddler, eyes like two dark coins. I thought of my mother buttoning my school cardigan before a winter exam, the way her fingers moved quick and hummingbird certain. I thought of my father teaching me to check the perimeter before locking a deal. Windows, doors, who's in the room and who thinks they are. I thought of the lemon tree on the far side of the roof and how its blossoms always smelled faintly of clean beginnings. Rose, I said, and my voice was the calm at the center of the spiral. I love you. I love you. I love you. Damian sighed as if I had bored him. Enough. He pushed. The world let out the breath it had been holding. Falling is not like the movies. There is no slow-motion poetry, no montage. There is the slap of wind and the instant, perfect knowledge that the universe is not built to catch you. There is the shape of the skyline unzipping above you and the thickness of your child's scream against your throat. There is a catalog of regrets that arrives all at once, unalphabetized. Every time I didn't listen to my parents. Every time I believed a pretty sentence. Every paper I signed without reading. Every night I handed my daughter to a woman who sharpened knives for a living and called them nail files. I closed my eyes and made myself a last promise. If there was anything of me left on the other side of this, anything at all, I would be fire. Air roared. My stomach went hollow. My fingers dug crescents into the fabric of Rose's dress. He was so small. He was all that mattered. I tried to curl around her, make a human shield from bones and stubbornness and the weight of a love that should have been enough to raise buildings, not fall from them. Someone on the street shouted. A car alarm began keening like a creature. I thought, ridiculously, about the stain this would leave on the stones and how the facilities manager would call a special company, and how the bill would go to accounts payable, and how someone there would stamp it and set it in a folder with my family's name on it. The white roses from my wedding tumbled through my mind like confetti, each petal a small, soft warning I hadn't heard. If there was a god of second chances, I wanted to bargain with it. If there was only gravity, I wanted to insult it. If there was nothing but air, then I wanted to name it and make it mine for the length of this fall. Rose's mouth was open against my collarbone. I pressed my lips to her hair. It's okay, I said, lying with my whole chest because lies I had learned too late are tools. The building's lower floors flashed by in fractured snapshots. Conference rooms, a janitor's closet, a winter coat forgotten on a hook. My life, compartmentalized, everything with a place. In the final second, time stopped pretending to be a friend. There was only light and sound and the odd, crystalline clarity that comes when everything that can matter has already happened. Then, nothing. Darkness and the long, clean silence after a story is ripped in half. My chest heaved with the memory of gravity ripping me apart, the scream still tearing through my throat even though there was no wind, no rooftop, no abyss rushing upward. My arms locked tighter around Rose, instinctive, desperate, only to find I was clutching nothing but air. My eyes flew open. No pavement. No blood. No final silence. I said, light. Sunlight streaming through white curtains I knew, curtains from the master bedroom of my own house. The scent of fresh linen, faint lavender from the detergent my mother always insisted we use. I blinked hard. My heart thrashed against my ribs as if it was trying to escape. My body trembled, my stomach heaving like I was still falling. And then his voice. Sophia. Damian. The bedroom door banged open. Damian Cross stumbled in, his face flushed, his hands trembling. His eyes glistened with tears, and in one hand he held up a small white stick. A pregnancy test. The sight of it made my skin crawl. We're having a baby, he choked out as if the words were too precious for his throat. His voice shook. I'm going to be a father, Sophia. I can't believe it. I've never been this happy in my life. I froze, the blood draining from my face. This moment. This exact scene. I remembered it like a scar. It was the day I had found out I was pregnant. The day Damian had cried, cradling me as though I had given him the greatest gift in the universe. The day I had mistaken his crocodile tears for devotion. But this wasn't supposed to be possible. I had fallen. I had died. I had clutched Rose to me and felt her tiny body ripped away by the wind. Yet here I was, alive. 3 years earlier. My hand trembled against my stomach. Nothing yet showed, but inside me life was beginning. Rose. My daughter. She wasn't gone. She wasn't broken at the bottom of a skyscraper. She was here. My lips parted, but no sound came out. My throat was too dry. My heart too raw. Damian dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against the back of my hand. His tears dripped hot against my skin. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a family." Revulsion surged like bile up my throat. Without thinking, I raised my hand and slapped him. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. Damian's head snapped to the side, his cheek already reddening. His eyes widened, stunned. He looked at me like I was a stranger. "Sophia? What the hell? What's wrong with you?" What was wrong with me? Nothing. For the first time in 3 years. Nothing at all. I had been blind before. Naive. I had believed his fake tenderness. I had mistaken his ambition for love. But not this time. Not anymore. I forced the fury back down, smoothed my face into something neutral. "Sorry," I murmured, lowering my eyes. "Maybe it's the hormones. Pregnancy makes me moody." I swallowed hard and added softly, "You'll just have to endure it." He stared at me for a long moment, confusion flickering in his eyes. Then, as if convinced by his own performance, his lips curved into a gentle smile. "Of course. I don't mind. If it helps you feel better, hit me again. I'll take care of you and the baby, Sophia. Always." Inside I laughed bitterly. Boys. He would take care of Isabella. He would take care of their son. He would push me and my daughter off a rooftop when the time came. But he didn't know I remembered. He didn't know I had been given another chance. As Damian busied himself in the kitchen, humming as though nothing had happened, I sat frozen on the edge of the bed. My hand drifted back to my stomach. "Rose," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "My baby. I'll protect you." I thought of my parents, Richard and Eleanor Hale. Alive. Healthy. Breathing. They were still here. They hadn't yet died in that accident Damian and Isabella had arranged. If I moved carefully, if I planned every step, I could save them too. My nails dug into my palms. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was war. And this time I would not be the naive little lamb. At dinner that night, Damian cooked steak just as he had in my first life. He set the plate in front of me, smiling, watching for approval like a dog waiting for scraps. I forced myself to smile back, my expression calm, my hands steady. "It's delicious," I said softly. Inside my thoughts burned. "How many times did I eat your food, Damian, believing in your love while you planned my death?" He reached across the table, clasping my hand. "Sophia, you're carrying our child now. You shouldn't be working too hard. Let me take on your responsibilities at Hale Group. Just until you've recovered." The same line. Word for word. I pulled my hand back gently, letting my eyes widen with innocence. "Didn't you always want to prove yourself to my parents? If you take over through me, won't it make all your past efforts look like a joke?" For a moment his smile faltered. Darkness flickered in his eyes. Then he recovered, pressing a hand over his heart. "I just want to help you. I want your parents to see me as I am." His voice cracked as though the words were dragged out of his chest by grief. I nearly laughed out loud. The man deserved an Oscar. The next day there was a knock on the door. I froze. My stomach twisted, rage and loathing rising like a tide. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. Isabella Reed. She stood there in a scarlet dress with a neckline designed to seduce, her hair spilling in glossy waves, her smile bright and affectionate. "Sophia. I missed you so much." She squealed and lunged forward, arms wide to hug me. In my past life I would have hugged her back. I would have believed in her warmth, her sweetness. I would have welcomed the poison into my veins. Not this time. I shoved her back. My palm cracked against her cheek. Isabella gasped, stumbling, her hand flying to her face. "Sophia. What's wrong with you?" I smirked coldly. "Hormones," I said flatly. Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering. But before she could speak, Damian appeared, rushing out of the kitchen. "Isabella? What's going on?" His hand caught her arm, his voice full of false concern. Something inside me hardened. Look at them, matching swollen cheeks standing side by side. Husband and mistress. Betrayer and traitor. Nothing, I said sweetly. Someone tried to hug me the second I opened the door. I didn't realize it was you, Isabella. Thought it was some creep. I tilted my head. But what did you mean just now? Did I find out something? Her face paled. She glanced at Damian, fury flashing in her eyes. Nothing, she said sharply. Then, forcing a laugh, she added, really, congratulations, you two. Baby. That's wonderful news. Thanks, I replied coolly. Inside, my stomach boiled with satisfaction. They were rattled. Already I had turned their game upside down. As Isabella stayed for tea, chattering about staying in Clearview for a while, I smiled sweetly. Stay as long as you want, I said warmly. The spare bedroom is always reserved for you. You're my best friend after all. Her eyes lit up with victory while Damian's mouth tightened at the corners. Perfect. Let her think she had won. Let her dig herself deeper into my house, my life, my trap. Because this time I wasn't her victim. This time I was her executioner. The phone trembled in my hands before I even pressed the call button. For 2 years in my first life, the sound of my parents' voices had been a memory, an ache that pressed against my ribs when I tried to sleep. I had attended their funeral in a haze, my belly swollen with rose, my tears mixing with fury at a world that had stolen them. But now, they were alive. Alive. My thumb pressed the number without hesitation. My mother's voice answered after only 2 rings, warm and bright, the way sunlight used to spill across our kitchen table. Sophia? Darling? What's wrong? You sound. The dam broke. A sob tore through me before I could stop it. My free hand flew to my mouth trying to cage the sound, but it only came louder, harder. Mom, I choked out. Can I come stay with you and Dad for a few days? There was silence, then a sharp inhale. Of course, Sophia. Why are you even asking? I'll send Uncle James right away. Uncle James. Our family's driver since I was in kindergarten. I could almost see his steady smile, the way he always bowed slightly when opening the car door as if I were already a queen. I'll be ready, I whispered. When the call ended, I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. Tears spilled hot and relentless down my cheeks. Damian was in the kitchen with Isabella, their voices muffled but close enough to remind me of where I was. I swiped at my eyes, straightened my shoulders and forced my voice steady. Damian, I called, stepping into the hallway. He emerged, still holding a dish rag, his smile practiced. Sophia, sit down. I'll bring dessert. I'm going to stay with my parents for a few days, I interrupted. His brows lifted, surprise flickering across his face. Then his lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Of course. You need rest. I'll drive you myself after dinner. So confident. So sure he had me wrapped tight in his grasp. I smiled sweetly. Thank you. Uncle James arrived within the hour, punctual as always. The black Maybach gleamed at the curb, its polished frame a familiar anchor. My chest tightened at the sight. I remembered this car. I remembered it crushed under twisted metal, flames consuming it until there was nothing left but charred skeletons. My parents' bodies, Uncle James as well. I had gone into premature labor when I heard. But this time, no. Not this time. As he opened the door for me, Uncle James's lined face softened. Miss Sophia, he greeted, voice thick with emotion. It's been too long. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It really has. The city blurred past the windows as we drove. Every corner felt like a memory reclaimed, every streetlight a ghost turned warm again. When we pulled into the Hale estate, the gates opened wide and there they were, my parents waiting on the front steps. My mother's hair shone under the porch light, her eyes glistening. My father stood tall, his jaw set in that firm, protective way he had when the world disappointed him. The second I stepped out, my mother rushed forward, gathering me into her arms. Mom, I whispered, clinging to her as if I'd never let go. She held me tighter. Oh, Sophia. My girl. When my father's arms circled around us both, the sob I'd been holding in broke free. I buried my face against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of his cologne, the one I'd missed so much it haunted my dreams. For the first time in years I felt safe. That night we sat around the dining table just like we used to. My mother had cooked all my favorite dishes. Braised pork belly, steamed fish with ginger, dumplings crisp just right. My father had even left work early, trading his briefcase for an apron to help in the kitchen. I ate until my stomach hurt, laughing when my mother scolded me for taking a third helping. For a fleeting moment, it was as though the last 3 years had been erased, like the betrayal, the fall, the death were nothing but a bad dream. But dreams didn't leave scars like mine. After dinner, I set my chopsticks down and looked at them seriously. Mom, Dad, there's something I need to tell you. They exchanged a glance, the air shifting instantly to alertness. I inhaled, steadying myself. Then slowly I told them everything. Not everything at once. I didn't tell them about the rooftop. Not about Rose's broken body in my arms. That was too raw, too sharp. But I told them about Damian's ambition. About Isabella's sly manipulation. About the way I had felt uneasy, the way I had begun to doubt. My parents listened in silence, their faces grim. My father's hand clenched into a fist on the table. I knew it, he muttered. That boy was a wolf from the beginning. My mother placed her hand over mine, her touch warm and strong. Sophia, thank you for telling us. We'll be careful. You're not alone in this. Tears pricked my eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. I won't let them hurt you. Not again. Later, in my old bedroom, I sat cross-legged on the bed with my laptop open. Uncle James had brought me a set of small devices. Tiny surveillance cameras, sleek and unnoticeable. I turned one over in my hand, the lens glinting. In my past life I had never thought to watch Damian. I had trusted him completely. I had handed him everything. Not this time. I would know what he was doing, who he was with, what he was plotting. Every word, every secret, every betrayal, I would see it all. I spent the next hours mapping out my house in meticulous detail, deciding where each camera should go. Living room, master bedroom, Damian's office, the kitchen. Even the spare room I knew Isabella would angle to occupy. By the time the plan was complete, a cold calm had settled over me. I wasn't the naive girl anymore. I was a hunter setting traps. The next morning I accompanied my father to Hale Group headquarters. The building's glass facade gleamed under the sun, just as imposing as I remembered. Damian was already there, waiting outside my father's office, his smile bright, his posture humble. He looked every inch the devoted son-in-law, the hard-working protégé. My father greeted him warmly, the way a seasoned businessman greets a pawn he intends to use. Damian, he said. Sophia tells me you're eager to learn. It's good. A company like Hale Group needs strong shoulders. Damian's eyes flicked toward me, questioning, but I gave him a calm smile. Yes, sir, Damian said, bowing his head. I want nothing more than to prove myself. Then you'll start as general manager, my father replied. Salary, $1. No bonuses. No shares. You'll earn your place by sweat, not handouts. Damian's face froze for just a second, but then he forced a smile. Of course. I understand completely. I nearly laughed. In my past life he had gloated when I begged my parents to give him a position. He had thought himself clever, cunning, triumphant. But now I was the one pulling the strings. That night back at home I installed the first camera. It was hidden in a photo frame on the living room shelf, angled perfectly toward the sofa where Damian liked to lounge. As I tightened the last screw I whispered, "Let's see what show you put on when you think no one's watching." My phone buzzed with the feed, the screen showing a clear view of the room. I smiled, satisfaction curling through me. Damian had no idea the stage was set. And I was no longer the audience. I was the director. The knock at the door came at dusk. I had been expecting it. Damian had been restless all day, pacing the living room in a way that reminded me of a predator sniffing the wind before a hunt. He pretended to check emails, pretended to make calls, but I knew better. He was waiting. And so was I. I wiped my hands on a towel, set the teacup down, and walked to the door. The second I opened it, there she was, Isabella Reed. She stood framed by the fading light, dressed in scarlet, the kind of red that made men forget their wives. The neckline of her silk blouse plunged low enough to announce her intentions. Her lipstick matched perfectly. Every strand of her glossy chestnut hair fell exactly into place. "Sophia," she cried, her voice dripping with warmth. "I've missed you so much." Her arms opened wide, ready to enfold me, ready to bury me in the sweet-smelling embrace of betrayal. In my first life I would have stepped into her arms, relief flooding me at the comfort of my best friend. I would have welcomed the poison. But this time I saw her clearly. The woman who had stood at my side in wedding photos, smiling as though my happiness were her own. The woman who had whispered encouragement in my ear while secretly sharing my husband's bed. The woman who had laughed as Damian shoved me and my daughter off a rooftop. My hand lashed out before she could touch me. The slap rang sharp and satisfying. Isabella gasped, stumbling back, her hand flying to her cheek. Her eyes widened, flickering with shock, suspicion, and then quickly, calculation. "Sophia, what are you doing?" she stammered. I smirked. "Hormones," I said flatly, repeating the excuse that had worked so well on Damian. Isabella's lips parted, but before she could speak, Damian rushed out from the kitchen, his dish rag still in hand. His eyes went straight to her reddened cheek, his hand closing protectively around her arm. "Isabella? Are you okay?" His voice was soft, almost tender. A bitter laugh bubbled up inside me. They weren't even careful anymore. "I'm fine," she said quickly, though her gaze flicked toward me with unmasked hatred. "Really, it was nothing." I tilted my head, my smile sweet. "Funny. You said something just before I slapped you. Something about me finding out." "Finding out what, Isabella?" Her body stiffened. For the briefest second, panic flashed across her face. Then she laughed too brightly. "Nothing. I was just surprised, that's all." "Really, congratulations, Sophia. Baby. That's such wonderful news." "Thanks," I said coolly. That evening, Isabella lingered. She perched on my sofa, sipping tea, her long legs crossed, her red nails drumming against the porcelain. "I'll be staying in Clearview for a while," she announced suddenly, as if daring me to object. "It's been so long since I've seen you, Sophia. I thought maybe I could spend some time here. Catch up. Just like old times." Old times. When she was eating meals in my house, borrowing my clothes, smiling at me with lips that tasted of Damian. I forced a smile, my voice soft and syrupy. "Stay. This is your home too. The guest bedroom has always been reserved for you." Isabella's eyes lit up. She glanced at Damian, who was trying and failing to hide his unease. Perfect. Let her think she had won. Let her settle in, make herself comfortable, confident in her little victory. The higher she climbed, the further she would fall. The next morning I rose early, already dressed when Isabella stumbled into the kitchen in one of my silk robes. She stretched, feigning casualness, but her eyes darted to Damian's empty seat. He had left early for Hale Group, eager to prove himself. I set down my teacup and smiled sweetly. "Good morning, Isabella. Did you sleep well?" She nodded, yawning. "Your bed sheets are so soft. Luxury, really. I could get used to this." "Good," I said. "Then you won't mind helping out a little. Would you fetch me some warm water?" Her brows shot up. "Water?" "Yes." My tone was innocent. "You don't mind, do you? You've always been like a sister to me." For a moment her mask cracked. I saw the resentment flash, quick as lightning. But then she forced a smile. "Of course not." Watching Isabella Reed carry a basin of water to me, kneeling at my feet, her face tight with barely contained rage, it was a satisfaction sweeter than revenge. "Oh, and Isabella," I added as she set it down, "I'm craving something home-cooked today. Why don't you make lunch? You've always been such a good cook." She froze. I don't really." "Takeout isn't healthy for the baby," I interrupted, placing a protective hand on my stomach. "Please? I'll feel so much better if you do it." She bit her lip so hard I thought she might draw blood. But she went into the kitchen anyway. When she returned an hour later, the food was half-burnt and unevenly seasoned. I ate every bite with a smile. "Delicious," I said sweetly. "You really do take care of me, Isabella." Her eyes blazed, but she stayed silent. That night, after Damian returned home, I lay awake in bed, the glow of my phone lighting my face. The surveillance cameras I had installed streamed directly to the screen. On the feed, Isabella was pacing in the guest room, muttering under her breath. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed. "Damian," she whispered. "This isn't working. She's suspicious." My heart tightened, though not from pain. From grim satisfaction. "I don't care," Damian hissed back. "Play along. Keep her calm. I'll handle the company." She sighed, her voice low and sultry. "I can't stand this, Damian. Sneaking around. Watching her smile at me like I'm not sleeping in her bed when she's gone." My hand clenched around the phone. Then, softer, Isabella added, "You promised me since high school. You said you'd never let her have what should have been mine." High school. The pieces clicked together in my mind like glass shattering into a perfect mosaic. Their affair hadn't been some reckless fling after my marriage. It had been going on for years. Long before me. Long before the wedding. I nearly laughed. In my past life I had thought myself the chosen one. The woman Damian had fought for, the woman he had loved. But I had never been the first choice. I had been the distraction. Oh. But not anymore. Over the next few days, Isabella continued to play the part of the loyal best friend. She followed me around, helped with household chores, even fussed over me like a doting sister. But her eyes gave her away. Every time Damian brushed against her accidentally, every time their gazes lingered too long, every time she bit back her irritation when I asked her to fetch something, I watched. I let her think she was clever. Let her think she was winning. And at night I reviewed the surveillance recordings, building a library of evidence. They thought they were weaving a net around me. But I was the spider. One evening as we sat together in the living room, Isabella suddenly touched my hand. "Sophia," she began carefully. "Have you thought about letting Damian handle more of the company? You're pregnant now. You shouldn't be stressed." Her voice was soft, her eyes wide with concern. A performance worthy of applause. I tilted my head. What a good idea. But what if Damian gets too tired? He's already working so hard. Maybe you could help him. Her eyes lit up, greedy and eager. Of course. I'd do anything. I smiled, sipping my tea. That's what I'm counting on. That night, Damian broached the subject again, his arm draped around my shoulders, his voice soft. "Sophia, let me take on more responsibility. For our family. For the baby." In my past life I had begged my parents to give him that chance. I had believed him. But this time I smiled and said, "Of course, darling. I'll talk to them." His eyes shone with triumph. But behind my smile I was already planning. Planning how to let him climb just high enough that the fall would break him completely. The Archer Corporation project was all anyone could talk about. It was the kind of contract that could cement a company's legacy for the next decade. International logistics, tech integration, partnerships with 3 major overseas firms. Whoever won the bid would dominate the industry for years. In my first life, Damian had obsessed over it. He had begged for the chance to lead Hale Group's proposal. And foolishly, blinded by pregnancy hormones and his honeyed words, I had convinced my parents to let him. I remembered his triumphant grin when he walked into that boardroom, proposal in hand, only to fail spectacularly. I remembered the way he had blamed me afterward, blaming my interference, blaming my parents' distrust, blaming anyone but himself. This time I would use that obsession to end him. One evening, Damian came home later than usual. His tie hung loose around his neck, his hair mussed just enough to look rakish. He threw his briefcase down and strode to me, eyes shining with excitement. "Sophia," he said breathless. "You've heard about the Archer Corporation project?" I looked up from my tea, my expression calm. "Of course. Everyone has. They're opening bids next month." His voice trembled with hunger. "If we win it, Hale Group's name will be set in stone. Your parents will finally have to see me as their equal." The word was almost funny. But I tilted my head, feigning interest. "And what makes you think they'll let you handle it?" His jaw clenched. "Because I'll make them." I let a small smile play on my lips. "Then you'd better prepare something flawless." His eyes blazed, already imagining his victory. He didn't see the trap I was setting, the strings I was quietly tying around his wrists. The next week, Damian spent every waking hour drafting proposals, meeting contacts, arranging dinners. He came home late, smelling of whiskey and Isabella's perfume, muttering about logistics and supply chains. One night I slipped quietly into his study. His laptop was open, his notes spread across the desk in neat piles. I scanned them quickly. Mediocre. Sloppy. Half-baked. He thought ambition could substitute for talent. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket and slid it into the port. Within minutes I had copied every file. Later, in my bedroom, I sat at my laptop and began rewriting. Not his proposal. Oh no. That would remain exactly as it was, destined to fail. But I crafted a new one, flawless and airtight, based on memories from my past life. I knew what the Archer Corporation wanted. I knew which strategies had failed, which innovations had impressed. I knew their heir, Ethan Archer, and how his sharp mind craved precision. By dawn, a perfect proposal sat waiting. I smiled as I closed the file. In my past life I had been Hale Group's fool. In this one I would be its weapon. As the bidding date drew near, Damian grew restless. He snapped at staff, berated assistants, drank more heavily. Isabella trailed behind him like a shadow, whispering encouragement, her hand slipping into his when they thought no one watched. I watched through my cameras, every stolen glance, every soft kiss recorded and saved. At dinner one evening, Isabella sighed dramatically. Damian, you're working so hard. Sophia, don't you think you should take some of the burden from him? I placed my chopsticks down delicately. He's ambitious. Let him work. My parents will judge him by results, not excuses. Damian's smile was thin, but he nodded. He thought I was cold, detached. He thought he had me where he wanted me. He had no idea I was tightening the rope. The day of the presentation arrived. The Hale Group's board gathered in the conference hall, a long mahogany table gleaming under the lights. Damian stood at the head, his suit pressed, his hair slicked back. He looked every inch the confident executive. My father, Richard, sat with his arms crossed. My mother, Eleanor, sat beside him, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Damian cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity. Today, I present Hale Group's proposal for the Archer Corporation project. He clicked the remote. The projector lit up. Slides filled with graphs, numbers, strategies. His proposal. Mediocre. Weak. I watched the board members' expressions tighten, their eyes darting toward one another. My father's frown deepened. Damian didn't notice. He was too busy relishing the sound of his own voice. And then, it happened. The screen flickered. The graphs vanished. And in their place a video began to play. Gasps filled the room. On the screen, in high definition, Damian and Isabella were entwined on my bed. His hands roamed her body. Her moans filled the speakers. Their whispers of love and betrayal echoed in the silence of the boardroom. Damian, Isabella giggled on screen. Do you like being with me more than with Sophia? Damian's voice was low, rough with lust. Isabella, ever since high school it's only ever been you. The room erupted. Board members covered their mouths. My mother's eyes widened with fury. My father slammed his fist against the table. Damian staggered, his face draining of color. Turn it off. Turn it off. He lunged for the projector, nearly tripping over the cables. His hands shook as he fumbled with the remote, but it was too late. The video ended, but the damage was done. Whispers filled the room, sharp and poisonous. His wife's best friend. Unbelievable. On company property, no less. And he thought he could represent Hale Group? Damian spun toward me, his eyes wild. Sophia, you did this. I met his gaze calmly, my expression serene. Business is war, Damian. If you can't handle exposure, you shouldn't play the game. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. By the end of the day, the video had leaked online. Headlines screamed across every platform. Hale Group's son-in-law caught in scandal with CEO's best friend. Betrayal and infidelity rock business elite. Photos of Damian leaving the building, his face twisted with rage, went viral. Clips of the boardroom video spread like wildfire. Isabella disappeared, fleeing Clearview in shame. But I knew she wouldn't stay gone for long. She was too ambitious to abandon her prize. She would resurface. And I would be ready. At home that night, Damian stormed into the bedroom, his face red, his eyes bloodshot. You ruined me, he shouted, his voice cracking. Everything I worked for, gone. Do you understand what you've done? I sat calmly at my vanity, brushing my hair. You did this to yourself, Damian. He grabbed my wrist, his grip tight enough to bruise. You'll regret this. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze with icy calm. No, Damian. You will. For the first time I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Within days, Damian was ousted from his position. The board released a statement distancing themselves from his actions. Investors pulled back. Shareholders whispered about scandal, incompetence, disgrace. Me. I walked into the office the next week, my heels clicking against the marble floor, my parents on either side of me. Employees bowed their heads as we passed. Mrs. Hale, they murmured respectfully. Not Mrs. Cross. Never again. I looked up at the glass walls, the city stretching beyond them, and smiled. The world had finally seen Damian Cross for what he was. And this was only the beginning. The scandal had cracked Damian's life open like a rotten fruit, spilling everything foul and rancid for the world to see. What followed wasn't just embarrassment, it was collapse. The aftermath of scandal. For the first week, Damian barely left our house. He paced the hallways like a caged animal, his once proud shoulders hunched, his eyes shadowed with sleepless nights. His phone buzzed constantly, reporters, investors, former colleagues, all demanding answers. At first he tried to fight back. He called his contacts, insisting it was a misunderstanding, a malicious attack. But no one believed him. The video had been too clear. When doors slammed in his face, he turned to Isabella. He came back, of course. Women like Isabella never vanished for long. One evening, as rain lashed the windows, she arrived at the house, her hair damp, her makeup streaked. Damian nearly collapsed at her feet. "Isabella," he whispered, clutching her hands. "Tell me you'll stay. Tell me we'll get through this together." Her lips curved in a smile, sweet, soft, deceptive. "Of course, Damian. You know I've always believed in you." But her eyes told a different story. I saw it in the way they flickered toward the gleaming cars in our driveway, the family portraits on the wall, the evidence of a life she wanted but could never fully claim. And I saw it in her hesitation. She wasn't here out of loyalty. She was here to weigh her options. The weeks that followed were a symphony of Damian's downfall. He drank. Morning, noon, night. Bottles of whiskey lined the counter like soldiers at attention. He stopped shaving, stopped dressing properly, stopped caring. Every time he tried to claw his way back into Hale Group, he was denied. My father, Richard, made sure of it. "Cross is poison," I heard him tell the board one afternoon, his voice sharp. "We're cutting the infection before it spreads." The more Damian was excluded, the more desperate he became. And the more desperate he became, the more Isabella recoiled. One night I caught the two of them arguing in the guest room. "You promised me, Damian," Isabella hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You said you'd take control of Hale Group, that we'd run it together. But you're nothing now." "Nothing." Damian's voice broke. "I just need time. Sophia, she set me up. She'll slip, and when she does..." "Slip." Isabella's laugh was bitter. "She's smarter than you. She always was." Silence. Then softer, venomous. "I can't tie myself to a failure. Not when I have other options." And she did. Within days, whispers reached me. Isabella had been seen with Landon Archer, Ethan's reckless half-brother. Landon was notorious for gambling, partying, and wasting the family fortune. To Isabella, though, he was opportunity, a new ladder to climb. When Damian found out, he broke. I came home one evening to find him slumped on the sofa, a shattered glass at his feet, blood seeping from his knuckles where he had punched the wall. "She left me," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "She left me for him." I sat across from him, crossing my legs, watching him unravel. "You thought she'd stay?" I asked quietly. "She's a leech, Damian. And you're bled dry." His head snapped up, his eyes blazing. "This is your fault. You poisoned her against me." I smiled, unbothered. "Or maybe she finally saw you for what you are, weak." He lunged then, grabbing my arm, his nails digging into my skin. "Don't you dare." "Damian." My voice was ice. "Let go." For a moment he held on, trembling with rage. Then slowly his grip loosened. He collapsed back onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. I walked away, rubbing my bruised arm, satisfaction coiling in my chest. He was unraveling, and I didn't even need to lift a finger. While Damian spiraled, I worked. Hale Group thrived under my parents' leadership, and I quietly positioned myself as their successor. I attended meetings, studied contracts, cultivated alliances. Behind the scenes, I kept feeding Damian just enough rope to hang himself. I let him believe he still had a chance. I let him think he could redeem himself, if only he tried harder. And all the while I planted seeds, small leaks to the press about his incompetence, subtle whispers to investors about his recklessness. Each one chipped away at the last shreds of his credibility. Meanwhile, Isabella's new alliance with Landon Archer began to sour. At first she flaunted it, arriving at galas on his arm, dripping in diamonds he couldn't afford, laughing too loudly at his crude jokes. But Landon was no Damian. He had no discipline, no ambition. Within weeks his debts caught up with him. He gambled away fortunes, squandered opportunities, embarrassed her in public. One night I saw her storm out of a casino, mascara streaked, Landon trailing after her, drunk and belligerent. "You're pathetic," she spat at him. "You can't even give me what I want." Landon only laughed, stumbling into the night. And just like that, Isabella was adrift again, clinging to the wreckage of men who could never save her. Damian reached his breaking point soon after. Late one evening he burst into my study, his eyes wild, his breath reeking of alcohol. "They've ruined me," he shouted. "Your parents, your precious board, they've destroyed my life." I set down my pen, meeting his gaze calmly. "You destroyed yourself, Damian." He slammed his fists against the desk. "No. This isn't over. I'll find a way back. I'll make them pay. I'll make you pay." I leaned back in my chair, my voice soft, dangerous. "Careful, Damian. Threats have consequences." He froze, staring at me. For the first time I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not just rage but fear. In the weeks that followed, Damian's allies abandoned him one by one. Old friends stopped answering his calls. Investors cut ties. Even his mother, once his fiercest defender, turned her back on him, ashamed of the scandal he had brought to their name. He was alone. And I made sure he felt it. Every day I moved further from him, sleeping in another room, speaking to him only when necessary, treating him like a stranger. The man who had once believed he owned me now lived like a ghost in my house, wandering halls that no longer belonged to him. And he knew it. Finally, when the time was right, I made my move. I arranged for Damian to be offered a business opportunity. A shady deal with a group of investors notorious for cutting throats when things went wrong. Desperate, Damian took it without hesitation. I knew he would. And when it collapsed, when the evidence pointed directly to him, when the authorities came knocking, he would have no one left to shield him. No allies. No mistress. No power. Just the ruins of everything he had once been. One night, as I tucked my daughter Rose into bed, I sat for a moment watching her chest rise and fall, her tiny hand clutching her stuffed bear. I thought of the woman I had been in my first life. Naive, trusting, blind. The woman who had handed her heart to Damian and her loyalty to Isabella, only to be pushed off a rooftop for her devotion. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone sharper, colder, stronger. Damian and Isabella had built their world on lies and betrayal. And now that world was crumbling piece by piece. And I was the one holding the hammer. The night was too quiet. That kind of silence never meant peace in my world. It meant a storm was about to break. And Damian Cross was the storm. By now Damian had nothing left. The scandal had destroyed his name. Isabella had abandoned him for Landon Archer and been discarded again. The press hounded him mercilessly. His old allies, his drinking buddies, even his mother. Every last one of them had turned their backs on him. But Damian had always been dangerous when cornered. I discovered the plot one cold evening while reviewing surveillance logs. My hidden cameras in his study caught him meeting with 3 men I recognized instantly. Small-time criminals, men with more arrests than brain cells. Their voices were low, but the microphones caught every word. "It'll look like an accident," one of them muttered, tapping ashes from his cigarette. "Brake lines cut, tires blow out, maybe a fire on the highway. Quick. Clean." Damian's reply was venomous. "I don't care how. I just want them dead. Richard, Eleanor, Sophia. All of them. If my daughter's with them, so be it. The Hale name dies tonight." For a moment the world seemed to tilt beneath me. He wanted our child dead. Not that it surprised me. In my first life he had thrown her off the roof without blinking. But hearing it again, seeing the cold calculation in his eyes, it made my blood burn. This time I would not be the victim. This time Damian Cross would fall. I didn't confront him immediately. Rage was tempting, but rage was sloppy. And sloppy got people killed. Instead I spent the next week preparing. First, I copied the recordings, storing them in 3 different locations. One in Hale Group's legal department, one with a trusted lawyer, and one in my personal vault. Second, I arranged for private security. Discreet but lethal if needed. My parents protested, but when I showed them the footage, their faces hardened with grim understanding. Finally, I set the bait. I told Damian we'd be attending a gala outside the city, a long drive late at night. I knew he'd hear. I knew he'd tell his hired thugs. And I knew they'd prepare. But so would I. The night of the gala arrived. My parents and I drove out together, Rose safely at home under heavy guard. Halfway down the highway, just as expected, the ambush came. A black van swerved into our lane, headlights blinding. Another vehicle boxed us in from behind. The men spilled out, masks on, weapons glinting in the dark. My father cursed under his breath, gripping the steering wheel tight. My mother reached instinctively for my hand. And then our attackers froze. Because from the shadows my security team emerged. Armed, disciplined, merciless. Within seconds the thugs were disarmed, forced to their knees under the blinding beams of tactical flashlights. Their leader tried to fight back, lunging with a knife. He ended up face first in the gravel, boot pressed against his neck. The look on his face when he realized he'd walked into a trap was almost pitiful. Almost. The police arrived minutes later, sirens wailing through the night. The men spilled everything the moment they were cuffed. They weren't loyal enough to stay silent. Money had been their only motivator, and Damian had promised them a fortune. When the officers asked for proof, I handed them the recordings. Damian's face, his voice, his words, all crystal clear. It wasn't just conspiracy. It was premeditated attempted murder. By dawn, Damian Cross was in handcuffs, dragged from his bed as reporters swarmed his home. Cameras flashed as he was shoved into the back of a police car, his once proud face twisted with rage and humiliation. The headlines blazed across every paper. Damian Cross arrested for attempted murder of Hale family. Business scandal explodes into criminal case. The city feasted on his downfall. And I savored every bite. But fate hadn't finished with Isabella Reed. When news of Damian's arrest broke, she made the mistake of slithering back into the Cross mansion, sobbing and screaming that she had been betrayed. "You promised me, Damian," she wailed, clawing at his mother's arm. "You said you'd leave Sophia. You said we'd be together." Mrs. Cross snapped. The older woman had lost everything. Her son's reputation, her family's standing, their wealth. Seeing Isabella, the snake who had helped ruin it all, sent her into a frenzy. Witnesses said the fight was vicious. Screams echoed through the halls. A vase shattered. A fall down the marble staircase. When the police found Isabella, her body lay broken at the foot of the stairs, blood pooling beneath her head. Mrs. Cross sat trembling nearby, her hands shaking, her face pale as chalk. The press called it an unfortunate accident. I called it poetic justice. Weeks later, when the trial began, I visited Damian in his cell. The guard led me down the echoing corridor, past rows of bars and hollow eyes. The smell of sweat and iron hung thick in the air. Damian sat at the table, chains on his wrists, his once handsome face gaunt and hollow. When he saw me, he sneered. "Come to gloat, Sophia?" I sat down across from him, folding my hands. "No. I came to say goodbye." He laughed bitterly. "Goodbye? Don't act like you've won. I'll get out. I'll rebuild. You can't keep me here forever." I leaned forward, my voice low and calm. "Isabella's dead." The words hit him like a physical blow. His smile faltered, his eyes widened, his breath caught in his throat. "You're lying," he rasped. "She fell down your mother's stairs," I said coldly. "She died crying your name. That's the legacy you gave her." His face crumpled. For a moment I saw the boy he had once been, arrogant, selfish, desperate to be loved. And then it shattered, replaced by a howl of grief and rage that echoed through the cell block. I stood slowly, smoothing my skirt. "This is where your story ends, Damian. Not on a rooftop, not in triumph, but here, in chains, alone, forgotten." He slammed his fists against the table, the chains rattling violently. "Sophia," he screamed. "You think you've beaten me? You think you're free? You'll always have me inside your head. You'll never escape me." I looked down at him, unflinching. "I already have." And with that, I turned and walked away, his screams chasing me down the corridor until the heavy steel doors closed behind me. Outside, the sun was rising. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift from my chest. Damian Cross was finished. Isabella Reed was gone. The people who had destroyed my first life were nothing more than ashes scattered in the wind. I had avenged myself, my daughter, my parents. And for the first time I truly believed, this was not just revenge. It was freedom. The world did not end with Damian Cross. It only began again. After Damian's arrest and Isabella's death, the storm that had consumed my life finally broke. For the first time in years, I woke up without dread curling in my stomach, without the memory of falling through the air, without the phantom ache of betrayal lodged in my chest. The mornings were quiet. I could hear birds singing outside the wide windows of the Hale estate. The sunlight warmed my skin instead of reminding me of all the days I had wasted in sorrow. Most importantly, Rose was safe. I would never forget the first time she ran into my arms after Damian's trial ended. Her little face lit up, her laugh spilling like silver bells as she wrapped herself around my neck. "Mommy," she squealed, pressing her cheek against mine. "You're home." Yes, I thought, clutching her tiny frame to me. I was finally truly home. With Damian gone, the Hale Group needed stability. Investors worried, employees whispered, competitors circled like vultures. It was time to step forward. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, had been my shield for so long. But now, as I walked into the grand conference room, every board member's eyes on me, I knew it was my turn. I stood tall at the head of the table, my hair swept back, my voice steady. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "The era of cross is over. The Hale Group belongs to the Hale family again. And under my leadership, it will rise stronger than ever." The room buzzed with murmurs, a few skeptical, most hopeful. My father's approving nod steadied me. My mother's faint smile filled me with courage. I laid out our new strategies, expanding into sustainable technology, forming global partnerships, cutting ties with tainted vendors who had once colluded with Damian. Every step was precise, deliberate, unstoppable. By the time I finished, silence hung heavy in the room. Then came applause. Soft at first, then louder until the sound rolled through the room like thunder. I had not just reclaimed my place, I had claimed it for the first time. In the months that followed, one name kept returning to me: Archer Corporation. Their heir, Ethan Archer, had been cautious after Damian's scandal nearly tainted his family's reputation. But when I reached out to propose a partnership, he surprised me by accepting the meeting personally. We met at the Hale Group headquarters, in the same boardroom where Damian had once humiliated himself. Ethan was different from what I expected. Where Damian had been brash, arrogant, desperate to prove himself, Ethan was calm, deliberate. He studied me with sharp gray eyes, his presence quiet but commanding. "Miss Hale," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I've heard the stories. About Damian. About the scandal. About the trial." I tilted my chin. "Then you know I don't tolerate betrayal. In business or in life." For the first time I saw his lips twitch into a faint smile. "Good. Neither do I." The partnership that followed wasn't born of necessity, but of mutual respect. Archer Corporation and Hale Group began joint ventures. Sustainable construction, clean energy, projects that promised not just profit but legacy. And slowly, in the long hours of negotiations and late-night calls, I began to see Ethan differently. Not as a savior. Not as a replacement. But as a man who understood the value of trust. It wasn't just business that healed me. It was Rose. She grew taller, her curls bouncing when she ran through the halls of the estate. Her laughter filled the air, chasing away the ghosts of my past. At night, when I tucked her in, she would look up at me with her wide, innocent eyes. "Mommy," she asked one evening, her voice small, "are you happy now?" The question caught me off guard. For a moment I couldn't answer. Then I leaned down, kissed her forehead and whispered, "Yes, sweetheart. I'm happy now." Her smile was enough to convince me it was true. Ethan never pushed. That was what set him apart from Damian, from every other man who thought power meant possession. Ethan Archer didn't demand, he waited. We would meet for coffee after long meetings, his dry wit cutting through the tension. He would walk me to my car, keeping his distance but always close enough that I felt safe. One evening, as we stood outside the Hale estate, he looked at me with quiet sincerity. "You've been through hell, Sophia," he said softly. "But you came out stronger. Don't let anyone dim that light again." For the first time in years, my heart stirred, not with fear, not with bitterness, but with something fragile. Something I had thought lost forever. Hope. Before I could fully embrace the future, I needed to close the last door of my past. I visited Damian one final time in prison. He was thinner now, his hair unkempt, his arrogance eroded into bitterness. When he saw me, his lips twisted. "Here to savor it again?" he sneered. "Your victory?" I looked at him, really looked, and felt nothing. Not rage. Not sorrow. Not even satisfaction. Just emptiness. "You don't matter anymore, Damian," I said quietly. "Not to me. Not to Rose. Not to anyone." his face contorted, but I turned away before his words could touch me. For the first time I walked out of that prison and didn't feel his shadow following me. The year turned. On New Year's Eve the Hale estate filled with family, friends and laughter. Champagne glasses clinked, music floated through the halls. Rose danced in a new dress her grandmother had bought her. As midnight neared I slipped outside to the balcony. The winter air was crisp, the city skyline glowing in the distance. Ethan joined me a few minutes later, a glass in his hand. "Escaping the noise?" he asked. I smiled faintly. Just catching my breath. The fireworks began then, bursting across the sky in cascades of gold and crimson. The light reflected in his eyes as he looked at me, not demanding, not forcing, just waiting. For once I didn't pull away. I let myself stand beside him shoulder to shoulder watching the sky ignite. And when Rose's laughter echoed from inside, I realized something. This was what freedom felt like. Not revenge. Not survival. But the chance to live, to love, to begin again. When the clock struck midnight I raised my glass, the fireworks blazing above. "To the Hale legacy," I whispered. But in my heart I added more. To Rose. To love. To second chances. The woman who had once fallen from the 20th floor was gone. In her place stood Sophia Hale, reborn, unbroken and unstoppable. And this time nothing and no one would ever take that away. The end.